$10.4 trillion. This is how much Americans spent using their debit or credit cards in 2022. And this number is forecasted to balloon up to $14 trillion by 2026. 76% of those purchases were made using cards from Visa and MasterCard. Contrary to popular belief, Visa and MasterCard are not financial institutions that can issue credit. Even though your banking card will likely have a MasterCard or Visa logo, these cards are not issued by these companies. The cards themselves are issued by banks or other financial institutions who are customers of Visa and MasterCard. Simply put, Visa and MasterCard provide payment processing services between multiple parties. For example, let's say that you are at a clothing store and you find a t-shirt for $25. You decide to use your debit card to pay for the shirt. Running your card through a POS system starts a very delicate process. Basically, your bank and the merchant's bank have to communicate to make sure that the transaction is valid. They have to verify that you are who you said you are. Furthermore, the merchant's bank has to ensure that your bank account has enough funds to clear the transaction. But having the two banks manually communicate with each other would be an inefficient, time-consuming process. And this is where payment processing services like Visa and MasterCard come to play. They have set up massive networks that allow financial institutions to communicate with each other in seconds. This way, when you run your card at a merchant, it's these companies ensuring that the transaction is legit, there are enough funds, and clear the transaction. Although these two companies provide similar services, they have differences that, as time goes on, might be what makes or breaks them. In 2022, 52% of all card purchases in the United States were made using a Visa card. This makes Visa the market leader by quite a margin. Visa's dominance in this market is mainly attributed to the fact that it was the first to enter this industry. Visa was established in 1958, and they had 8 years before MasterCard, their main competitor, was founded. This gave Visa a tremendous advantage as they were able to set up their network. And this advantage is still noticeable through all aspects of Visa's operations. In 2022, the number of Visa cards in circulation grew to 4.1 billion, a 28% increase since 2017, when Visa reported they had just over 3.2 billion cards in circulation. And these cards facilitated over $14.1 trillion in payments worldwide, which brought in approximately $29.3 billion in revenue, making a 60% increase over their 2017 revenue. Diving deeper into Visa's revenue, we can see that the company makes its money primarily from 3 different sources. 39% of Visa's revenue comes from data processing fees. This refers to money that Visa makes every time they process a transaction. Around 34% of the company's revenue comes from services. Service revenue refers to the fees that Visa charges to card issuers. For example, when a bank wants to issue a Visa card, they will have to pay a set of fees to Visa for them to use Visa's transaction network. Visa has over 18,000 financial institutions in their network, which is why their service revenue plays such an important role in their financial performance. Finally, 22% of Visa's revenue comes from international transaction fees. This refers to the fees that Visa charges to facilitate international payments between different entities. While the revenue figure is impressive, what truly makes the payment industry so lucrative are their profit margins. In 2022, Visa reported a net profit of $14.9 billion. This amounts to 51% of their entire revenue. For comparison, the retail industry averages a net profit margin of 4%. 24% of all card payments in the United States were made using a card issued by MasterCard in 2022. The company lags Visa simply because, as we already mentioned, Visa had the first mover advantage. The payment processing industry is quite rigid in the fact that the incumbency effects are very prevalent. This means that once a company establishes some market share, it is difficult for new companies to enter this market and quickly gain market share. MasterCard has historically been second to Visa. However, over the past few years, MasterCard has outperformed Visa in terms of growth rate. In 2022, there were just over 3.1 billion cards under the MasterCard network. This represents a 29% increase over 2017, and the company facilitated around $8.2 trillion in global purchase volume in 2022. which brought in approximately $22.2 billion in revenue, marking a 77% increase over their 2017 revenue. As we can see, during the same period, MasterCard recorded a growth rate 17% higher than Visa. Furthermore, MasterCard's stock has outperformed Visa's over the past 5 years. It has faster top-line growth, and it has that acquisitive nature that gives it a premium. And investors do believe one day it could get to that same margin that Visa has, which is what has made MasterCard's stock more attractive than Visa's. One edge that MasterCard has over Visa is its position in the international market. Visa did not used to own Visa Europe. It was branded Visa, but it was still a separate entity. Back in 2017, Visa was able to buy Visa Europe, and they had gone through a huge effort to modernize Visa's operations in Europe. But in the meantime, MasterCard has taken advantage of that sort of disruption to outgrow Visa significantly in Europe. Another difference between these companies lies in their revenue structure. MasterCard makes its money primarily from two sources. 64% of the revenue comes from the fees generated by their intricate payment network, so this refers to fees generated on each transaction across the globe. Whereas the other 36% is generated by something MasterCard calls value-added services. The value-added services bucket is then further divided into two larger categories: data consultancy and cybersecurity. As a payment processing company, MasterCard has access to tons of data. They utilize this data to act as consultants for various entities, banks, governments, retailers, and manufacturers. Additionally, they also help organizations improve their cybersecurity and secure their payment systems. MasterCard is also positioning itself as a key player in the business-to-business payment industry, which MasterCard estimated is a $25 trillion market annually in the US. Although MasterCard and Visa are in a very strong position, the future is not without challenges. The rise of digital payment platforms like Venmo and Zelle are already eating some of their business. As time goes on, these platforms might continue to gain popularity, further challenging MasterCard's and Visa's duopoly. Additionally, the rise of cryptocurrencies is also another potential threat. Blockchain systems make it possible for people to interact without needing third-party processors.